Illustration Rare cards continue to be the talk of the town right now, and with good reason. Now, whilst a lot of people perhaps think that these cards are becoming very overvalued, I actually think they're just reaching the prices that a lot of them deserve. Now, a little disclaimer, I don't think every single Illustration Rare card that has risen is what they deserve to be. I do think there are still some overvalued, overpriced Illustration Rare cards, but I just feel in general throughout the Scarlet and Violet era, Illustration Rare cards in general have been very undervalued. For example, let's have a look at the Lickitung here from Temporal Forces. I mean, when you look at what this card's price was about a year ago, you can see it was not much more than around $2. $2 is absolutely nothing. We're almost talking fodder price, just bulk, just kind of whatever. It's not worth much more than the cardboard it's actually printed on, which is ludicrous, right? I mean, look how beautiful that card is. We're talking Generation 1 Pokemon here. We're talking a cool Pokemon, Lickitung, right? In its element, stealing food. What a cool card that is. And that's why it's risen to $20. I think it's more of a case of it rising to the price this card deserves, more than it being hyped up and rising above a price that it really should be. I think it's just more of a case of Illustration Rares have always been quite underrated and are just finally getting the flowers they deserve and rising to prices that these cards really deserve. Another example would be this Metagross here. We're talking about Metagross. What a beautiful card, a pseudo legendary, a Generation 3 Pokemon, a mainstay, a staple of a lot of people's teams back in the early 2000s when they were playing Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald. It's a fantastic Pokemon and a really cool looking Pokemon too. And it's just a beautiful card, right? I've covered this in other videos. I've mentioned how much I love this and how cheap it is. And again, it's starting to get the flowers it deserves. It deserves to be a $30 card. You know what? It deserves to be more than $30. So the fact that over a year ago, it was around $4 for a Metagross card as beautiful as this. We're talking about Metagross here. One of the coolest and best Pokemon from Generation 3. Is it worth $4? No, they've just always been very underrated and undervalued, and they're just finally getting the flowers they deserve. Now, although potentially Illustration Rare cards, depending on who you ask, have always been undervalued, which is what I'm saying, then you start to think, but should they be the same price as SIR cards? SIR cards, of course, are a lot harder to pull. They're your main chase cards from the set. Therefore, should Illustration Rare cards be reaching the same price as SIR cards? I mean, when we take the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved, for example, which of course, as we know, headlines the Illustration Rares when it comes to pricing, and when we look at the way it's performed over the last 3 months, same as the price, and we compare that to the Charizard EX, which is the chase card from 151, it's an identical graph more or less, and the pricing is more or less the same as well. Which on the face of it sounds absurd to say, right? We're talking about a regular Illustration Rare in inverted commas. Yes, of course, it's the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved, but it's still just an Illustration Rare, and it's the same price as the chase card. And nonetheless, not just any chase card, but a Charizard, which as we know normally fetches a hefty price, one of, if not the most popular Pokemon in the entire IP. Therefore, it's crazy to just think the chase card and SIR goes for the same price as a regular Illustration Rare card. What I've also noticed is the fact that there's very minimal difference between an Illustration Rare and an SIR regarding the artwork. As we can see here, for example, I have the Groudon, the infamous Groudon from Paradox Rift. And when we compare it, for example, to the Altaria EX from Paradox Rift, of course, this card right here, this Altaria, is an SIR card, and the Groudon here is just a regular Illustration Rare. Now, the only difference being really is the fact that this Altaria here says EX, and it has an extra gold star at the bottom, which both indicate the fact that it's an SIR card. Just a very quick thank you to every single one of you and all of you that are new. A big welcome to the channel, and thank you for showing support on my videos. I really do enjoy seeing new faces here, and if you are not yet subscribed, please feel free to do so if you do enjoy a new video every other day about the Pokemon TCG. And to all of you, as always, of course, if you're enjoying the video, please don't hesitate to leave a like, as it really does help me out. Now, as mentioned, the only difference on the face of the card is the fact that an SIR says EX and has an extra gold star at the bottom, but of course that's not the only difference. An SIR card is a lot harder to pull than just a regular Illustration Rare, and you would assume that would make SIR cards instantly more expensive, as they're a lot harder to pull and a lot harder to obtain, and there simply, or should not be, as many to go around as regular Illustration Rare cards. But as we can see here from the comparison we just made with that Groudon and the Altaria EX cards, you can see that the Altaria EX, being the harder card to pull, is sitting around $70 right now, with the Groudon, the Illustration Rare card, sitting at $100 US. Now there's a varying amount of factors that come into play when determining the price of a Pokemon card, and I've used here 2 examples from the same set to kind of eliminate that factor, because obviously depending on what set a card comes from, it can influence the price. One can be more expensive than the other depending on what set it comes from, but when these 2 are from the same set, the only real variables are the type of card they are, Illustration Rare versus SIR, as well as the pull rates based on the card they are, right? But as you can see, the Groudon is $30 more expensive than that harder to pull Altaria EX card, which makes you think maybe pull rates aren't a very big deciding factor or determining factor when it comes to the price of a Pokemon card. It would seem their artwork and the type of Pokemon it is, for example, we're talking Groudon here versus Altaria, both Generation 3, so it's a fair game there, but Groudon, in my opinion, and probably a lot of people would agree, is a lot more desirable Pokemon and a lot more loved than Altaria. One huge positive that I think I've found with the fact that Illustration Rare card prices are rising quite a lot is the fact that it adds a lot of value to sets. Now, for example, Obsidian Flames, right? Normally a set would be dictated by the main chase cards, being SIR cards here, your EX cards, VMAX cards, of course, from Sword and Shield, etc, etc, but they're the main driving force behind the value of a set. Now, as you can see, Obsidian Flames, it's got a Charizard, of course, but it's not the best Charizard I've ever had, and just in general, the group of 4 we've got here are not the best group of chase cards we've ever got. When we look at 151, for example, here you've got the 3 original starter evolutions in Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise, as well as Alakazam and Zapdos, and are all in their own right very, very beautiful cards and very desirable, right? So therefore it adds a lot of value to the set. With Obsidian Flames not having this, with the fact Illustration Rare card prices are rising, it just adds more value to the set and more desire from the community to want to open packs, right? When you see Ninetales rising, or for example Cleffa, which has risen a lot recently, it makes you think, no, I want to chase that Cleffa now. Although before it wasn't an SIR, or it still isn't an SIR, but it wasn't considered a chase card because Illustration Rare cards were never as expensive as SIR cards, it just adds another level of desirability to wanting to open a set. For example, the Cleffa card right here, as you can see, it's now risen to almost $30, and it's a fantastically beautiful card, right? But the fact is, if you look at it, we'll pull up the year graph here, we can see it was only around $4.50 a year ago. So if you were opening Obsidian Flames a year ago, you would have thought, Cleffa, okay, cool, you know, $4, not bad, you know, it's a cool looking card. Now when you open Obsidian Flames, you're thinking, oh wow, that's like a $30 card. That's a great pull, you know? It adds a lot of value and just a lot more kind of happiness to the community when opening packs, because Illustration Rare cards are now a decent pull. They're a really good pull, whereas before it was like, oh yeah, cool, you know, a few dollars, but now they're worth a lot more. It just fills you with a lot more joy and happiness when opening in packs and gives you more desire to do so. I do just want to touch on and reiterate the point that not every single Illustration Rare card was undervalued and is now properly valued. Yes, there are still some cards that I believe with this rise have gone above what they should be and are now overvalued. For example, the infamous Drowzee Illustration Rare card from Scarlet and Violet Base. Now, for those of you that don't know, this card's seen a very, very, very big rise almost overnight, as we can see here from the shape of the graph. A couple of months ago, it was around $10, $11, $12, had a little bit of a decent rise, somewhat of a natural rise, as you can see from the shape of the graph, to around mid $20, and then overnight became an almost a $70 card, which stinks of a little bit of market manipulation perhaps when you see a rise that quick, so just be careful out there, guys. But the point being, is this card worth that much? I would say no. Now, there's certain factors that you have to consider, for example, the artist being Tomokazu Komoya, which, if you don't know, is a famous artist for his different style of art. It's very abstract style art, and it's quite cool, but it's very niche. Therefore, not the entire community is after or loves this style of art. Me, for example, a little disclaimer, I'm not the biggest fan of this style of art. I can appreciate its coolness and how different it is, and I like that, but it's not cards I'm desperate to acquire, right? But again, I appreciate there are people that do like that. But the point being, it's very niche, therefore there's not going to be a massive amount of desire for this style of card. Therefore, $60 for this card, in my opinion, is quite overpriced when you compare it, for example, to this Ninetales, which I'll continue to bang on about until the end of time, for Obsidian Flames, which in my opinion is one of the most beautiful Illustration Rare cards we have gotten from the era. and is only $25 US. So of course you can ask the question, what price should illustration rare cards be? Now, that's extremely subjective because it depends on a lot of things, as we've been through, on the Pokemon, on the artwork, on the set, the era, etc, etc, etc. The list goes on of the determining factors for the price of an illustration rare card. But of course, there's also, you need to remember that these are new in the Scarlet and Violet era, and Scarlet and Violet came out in 2023, to be more specific, March. Therefore, we've just arrived to 2 years since they were released, since we've received illustration rare cards. Therefore, it's kind of difficult to say. I think being new in the grand scheme of things, we've kind of just not realized what we've had in front of us, and we're kind of waking up to realizing how beautiful these cards are. They're still so new and they're still finding their place on the market. But what I do think is that they're cards that will age really, really well. We don't know what we'll get in the Gen 10 next year when the new era comes out. It could be that they do away with illustration rare cards, and if that is the case, we could see us start to appreciate just how beautiful these cards are, start to wake up and realize that, and that's when we could really see these cards fly in value. Guys, it's been a pleasure to cover illustration rare cards, as they're some of my most favorite from the era. I absolutely adore how beautiful they are. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. I'm interested to know what your take is on illustration rare cards, whether you think they have always been undervalued, like I said, whether you think they are overvalued now, or whether you think, as I said, they're just kind of finding the right value as they've always been underappreciated. But anyway, guys, that does conclude things for today. So if you are still here, as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate your support. Please leave a like if you have enjoyed it, and of course, if you are new, please feel free to subscribe if you do enjoy content around the Pokemon TCG. If you didn't catch one of my last video, guys, where I covered Obsidian Flames, in my opinion being one of the most underrated sets from the era, you can check that video out right here. But of course, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. I've been PokeCharlotte, and I'll catch you in the next one.